Bienvenue, welcome. Welcome to Massey College. My name is Nathalie Desrosiers, and I'm the principal of Massey College. It's a great pleasure to have you here in person to discuss this really interesting idea about how do you get published. And so I am delighted to see so many people here and so many junior fellows interested in thinking about this issue. I want to say, before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that Massey College is built on Indigenous lands, the lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship toward this land and also the great privilege that we have to continue to do our work here and to welcome you all. So thank you very much for being at Massey today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Wency because I have to go and host a meeting on the bylaws of Massey College. And I would much rather be with you. So thank you, Wency.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad that you are all here. Really nice to see you all, and thank you so much to all our guests for coming here. I'll just do a quick introduction of our guests first, and then I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about what this whole book publishing seminar is all about, how we kind of conceived of the idea for it. So we have Samira Al-Hilal here over to my far left. She is the president of the House of Nancy Press and Groundwood Books, which is a children's publisher, and House of Venancy, as we know, is the publisher of the Massey Lectures. Then we have Patrick Crane here, who is a Quadrangle Society member, and he has been in the publishing industry for 50 years. He is the publisher and editor of large of his own imprint, Patrick Crane Editions at HarperCollins Canada. We have to my far right Jen Nock, who is senior editor of ECW Press, and she acquires and edits fiction and nonfiction. And we have Richard Ratzlaff, who is editor at McGill Queen's University Press. So before I turn it over to our guests, just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of intro about what this book publishing seminar is all about. This is our first of two. So for this first one, we have industry experts here to speak about the process. And for our second of our seminars, we will bring in authors to kind of give lessons of, what they wish they had known before they embarked on their book writing journeys. So we kind of are the other journalism fellows, and I early kind of last fall, we had sort of been talking about our dreams of what we wish to write. Michael Barkley is the only one of us who has actually written a book, and not only one book but 3, and bestsellers as well. So we were kind of just tossing around our ideas about how we wish we could write a book, or how, things that we wanted to do. And we figured, well, might as well, we have experts that we can call upon to come into Massey and not only share it with us, but I know that all of you who have come here today, I'm sure, have books either in your mind or in your desktops or on your laptops that you're wanting to share. So here's how this session will work. I'll turn it over to our panelists. Each one will have 10 minutes to kind of give a little bit of introduction to themselves, speak about what kind of books that they publish and that they're interested in working with. And the big question that we put to them is, what advice would you give to first-time authors or very newbie authors? What lessons would they give? So each person will have 10 minutes, but then we'll have a Q&A, and we'll take questions from the audience. And then after this is the exciting part of the session, is we will break it up and give you guys a chance to speak to our guests and give them a chance to get to know you and learn about the projects that you're working on. So Greg and Darlene have very kindly put together some tea and cakes, or tea and coffee and snacks and stuff. And please do take advantage of that and take advantage of the time to chat about it. And I really hope that at the end of the session, you will all be very inspired to write your books and to kind of have an idea of where to start. So with that, I will turn it over to Samara first.
All right, I'm going to demask. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation to chat with you. I really hope that we have time for questions. I love these kinds of interactions personally, because I often will learn as much from you as I hope you will learn from me and my colleagues here. I made a few notes just to keep myself on track, because it would be so easy to go over the 10-minute time that we have, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. I hope that between myself and the other guests here, that we'll be able to give you a good overview, because we each come from, different companies and have different experiences, and I am always learning about this process as well on the author session, because I'm sure they would have some great thoughts that I could take away as well. So, brief description of my role. Hope you know a little bit about my company. As Wency said, I'm from House of Anansi Press and Groundwood Books, and Anansi this year is celebrating its 55th anniversary, and next year in 2023 Groundwood will be celebrating its 45th, so both fairly storied long-time companies. There are a number of independent Canadian publishers who all were formed in either the late 60s, early to mid 70s. There are a number of them around, and I'm also on 3 industry boards, which sound like an alphabet soup. The ACP, which is the Association of Canadian Publishers, Leave Canada Books, which is the LCB, which is the Association for the Export of Canadian Books, both French language and English language, as well as other languages, and the PLR, which as writers or aspiring writers is probably of great interest to you, the public lending right. We are one of only about 37 countries that have a public lending right. And if you publish a book that is eligible under the public lending right criteria, you should register with them. The registration period is actually underway, I think, right now. It's once a year for about 2.5 months. And to the degree that your work is found in select public library systems across Canada, you will be compensated. So checks range anywhere from less than $100 to a few $1,000s. It's really meaningful income to anyone working in the arts across this country. So I'm really honored to be a part of that advisory board. So Wency asked to describe what is my typical day like. I'm not sure that that's of huge interest to you, but I'll describe, thought about some things that I did just today or in the last few days. Honestly, my job, my title is one I'm still getting used to, but my job entails everything from, real book-related kinds of things, like looking at cover roughs. Just recently, I was involved in conversations with Natalie, actually, on the title for this year's Massey lectures, and there was lots of good discussion around that. I also recently approved an ad that's about to appear in the Walrus. Urgent things that come up, something breaking on social media, something where we may have to comment or make a decision. Thinking about what to say at events like this is a part of my job. And I do a lot of staffing, employee, HR kinds of related things, creating job postings, performance reviews, salary discussions, all of that kinds of stuff. I also sign checks, which is also always a joy to give away money. I did some just this morning. So anyway, it runs the gamut. I tend to think of my job as a lot of anticipating risk and a lot of problem solving and answering questions, which is why I have decision fatigue on really unimportant things like what to have for lunch, or it doesn't matter. The types of books we publish. So Anansi specializes, I would say, in finding, developing, and publishing writers of literary fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and drama, as well as works in translation. And Groundwood specializes in children's books of the highest possible quality for all ages, and it's grown to include fiction, picture books, graphic novels and nonfiction. That's just a snapshot. So a few tips from me. If you are looking to pitch a publisher or write a proposal, I've sort of grouped all those things together. Decide what type of publisher is right for the work that you're doing. You know, is it a scholarly book? Is it an educational book? Is it right for a literary press? Is it right for a trade publisher? Is it a children's book? Is it a YA book? Is it an adult book? Is it a crossover book? Those are all really, it sounds obvious, but those are really important things to think about. Who are the readers you want to reach with your work? And a really important step that I think some people maybe don't spend enough time on, but can so save you time and energy, is to really spend time researching publishers' websites. Every publisher has one. Also follow them on social media. It helps a lot. But if you look at people's websites, it gives you a really good indication of what kinds of works they publish. A lot of publishers have long backlists, so it may not be indicative to see a book published 12 years ago as to what they're doing now. But, you know, take a look at the last 3 to 5 years. Do you see something there that is similar in flavor to the work that you're looking to publish, the work that you've written? Could you see it fit there, both in terms of the voices, but also the topics, the way the covers look, that kind of thing? That is what you're really looking for, because it's not worth your time to pitch publishers who aren't looking for the kind of work that you're offering. Read their submission guidelines. Most publishers of all sizes have submission guidelines on their websites, either in the, you know, the small print along the bottom that you click on, or they open a portal a few times a year. It's really important to read. A lot of thought goes into what is said there in terms of the best way to receive material, right down to like file format and where to send it and what your subject line should be. Some, like we just closed actually yesterday our Anansi submissions portal, which we open for 1 month, twice a year, in February and in August. And we note that on our website. We send out a note on social media that it's opening. We read all the submissions. Rest assured that houses read all the submissions. It sometimes takes a while. We received hundreds during this last round. I can tell you that for Groundwood, we receive thousands of submissions throughout the year. So for Groundwood, we don't have a specific window. And I can't stress this enough. As a person who among us does not receive way too much email? Like, it's just sort of the scourge of the modern age. A subject line that really, really clearly indicates what it is you're sending, if you're sending by email rather than a portal. So for instance, if the word submission is in there in cap letters, golden, like that will flag for the person you're sending it to what it is. I've honestly, I know it sounds obvious, but I've had people send me submissions and the word was documents, and I'm like, I just can't fish that out of my inbox because I didn't know the person's name, and it just says documents. And if I'm trying to flag or prioritize or direct to my editorial group, I'm not going to find it. So I give you that sort of humorous example, not to disparage anyone sending something, but like help your email get discovered by giving it a good subject line that includes the word submission. Book proposal, and then I feel like I'm already probably beyond my 10 minutes. I position your book if you can. Think of it as an elevator pitch, something, you know, brief and catchy that doesn't have to be overly descriptive. It will really help if you do that, because in-house, we have to do that, whether we're telling our colleagues about it, or in some houses you have to get sales and marketing on side right from the get-go. It really helps us if you, who know your work the best, do that to help us. Describe comparative or competitive titles if you can. You don't have to, particularly if it's fiction. That can be tricky, but if there are works you've read that are like yours, if you are a scholar and you know your market so well, help us with some of that. We'll do our own research, but it really helps if you give us a few tips. And do indicate who you are and if you've been published before, not necessarily with a book, but in literary journals, in magazines or newspapers, in a scholarly setting. You'd be amazed sometimes. We read submissions and we get all the way to the end, and someone's submitted through the unsoliciteds, and they've had work published before, or they've even published with us before, and we're like, you don't need to go through the unsolicited, portal. You can reach us. So, lead with that, because it just helps us know that you've had some sort of professional interaction of that kind. Keep it focused, unlike my chat here right now. Keep it focused. Do include, I know sometimes people aren't sure, people send sort of inquiry letters. I've got this project, would you like to see it? Yes, please just send it. Like, you don't need to do an inquiry letter. If it's fiction and you've written the whole work, please send the whole thing. If it's nonfiction, you don't have to have written the whole thing. A few chapters so that we can see your writing, and for sure an outline or a table of contents so we can get a sense of the whole work. For works of nonfiction, there's research that goes on, and sometimes people have got the whole idea and a framework, but haven't, written the whole thing just yet. I also don't want to forget about children's books. Some of you may be aspiring children's book writers and not necessarily writing for adults, but one of the questions that comes up a lot is, if I'm writing a picture book text or a graphic novel text or something that's to be illustrated, do I need to come with an illustrator or have illustrations? Absolutely not. Publishers love to think about those pairings. They know their markets, they know illustrator styles that might work. We're always looking to find new voices, new illustrators to bring to the pairing, and so please, as an author, don't think that you need to come with all of that. It's not necessary, and in fact, we prefer if you don't. I have a few other notes, but I feel like I'm past my time. Should I just turn it over to our next speaker? And
If you guys are all okay, please go ahead.
really? Okay. Okay. Maybe that would be great. I'll just highlight a few things. Do think about the length of your manuscript. Wency mentioned sort of the do's and don'ts of writing a manuscript, and I feel like I'll leave that to some of my colleagues here to address a little more. For the genre that you're writing for, make sure that it's not way too long or way too short. It also varies depending on market. A picture book in North America, the text is often fairly brief. If you go to some other places around the world, for their age range and schooling needs, sometimes the text is longer. And so do that research, at the library or at the bookstore to make sure you're sort of on track with your word counts. And word counts are definitely not my specialty, so I might leave that to Patrick or Jen or Richard. Please don't send the chapters in separate documents. Please, one document, so appreciated, and in a format that's, a Word doc is always appreciated. The question of agents. Obviously, you're going to hear different perspectives from lots of different people. My own perspective is you may need one to get in the door of some of the multinationals or the foreign-owned houses like Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster or HarperCollins. I feel like Patrick could speak to that. But most independent Canadian publishers do accept unsolicited submissions, as I just talked about. If you already have a relationship with a publisher, and I have seen this a lot, people have a foot in the door already or a work contracted, and then they go and get an agent. And, an agent is obviously going to help you with lots of things. It depends what you're looking for. If you already have a relationship with a publisher, I'm not sure why you would want to give away 15% of your proceeds to an agent when you already have that relationship. But if you're looking for someone to support you in a different way, break you into a different market, for instance, that you haven't had luck with yet, or you just don't want to deal with contracts and you want someone to look it over and feel assured about it, that's a great reason to engage an agent. And also, if you become an author who has so many books contracted and that's your primary work, people I'm sure need an agent to sort of help them manage the business that they're in. There's all kinds of great reasons to get an agent. But when you're looking to get your foot in the door, and if there are ways to submit without an agent, that's available to you. One thing I did want to mention, again, speaking for my company and as a person who has spent years figuring out what to offer people when we do make an offer on a book, there is a remarkable sort of consistency around the offers that we offer people, especially new writers who we hope to partner with for a lot of years and help develop careers and support and are really going to invest in. That idea of the sort of, we all hear about it, the six-figure debut author, the six-figure offer for a debut author. It's very, very rare, very rare. But it's so enticing, that idea. The more common thing is a fairly modest, advance. It is meant to be an advance against royalties, and the royalties will all flow through when we sell thousands and thousands of copies of your book. It's just that the advance is meant to be an offset against that. The last thing, and then I'll maybe sit down. Once he mentioned top myths that I'd like to debunk about producing a book. One I would flag for you is the process takes a lot longer than most people think. It's so common for us to have an author or an agent, for that matter. Great, we're signing a book right now, and we're talking about publication timing, and we might be saying fall 23, on the kids' side even 2024, 2025, which sounds like ages away to people. It's not, because we have to have the books ready far in advance for sales, marketing, and publicity reasons, for review reasons. We also need our data about the books out in the world really early. And then if your book is 4-color, it's often printed offshore, and that process alone can take a minimum of 3 months to get the books printed and shipped here. And then there are the ever-present supply chain challenges that we've all been hearing about in a multitude of areas, and printing and shipping is one of them. So things are taking even sort of longer. And that's without mentioning things like all the substantive editing, line editing, copy editing, typesetting, proofreading, cover designing that has to go on. So it does take longer than you might think, for good reasons. So maybe I will leave it there. I hope to talk with many of you later and chat about some questions. So thank you.
Patrick, if I can invite you to go out next.
Thank you, Samara. That was actually a very good summary of many aspects of book publishing. So what I would like to start off with is to talk to you more about the act of creation to begin with. I think one of the most important things that we forget about is you've got to have a good idea to begin with. You have to have a good idea to begin with. And that means not only with nonfiction, but with fiction. And I say that because we're in a time, I often try to figure out why. Maybe we're in an age of confession or something, but there are more people writing than ever before. Go into Indigo, go into one of the big box stores, and you will see what I mean. So the reason I'm pressing on this is that the competition is fierce. It is really fierce. Now in Canada, there are over, say, 100 Canadian-owned houses. Those houses tend to be somewhat on the smaller size, except for houses like ECW and Nancy and Biblioasis, but by and large, they're pretty small operations. Then, of course, we have the robust university presses, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that in a second. But I really want to emphasize the idea business. So you are going to write a nonfiction book. You really want to do the research. What can you add to that subject matter? What are you going to say to people to get their attention, to actually turn heads? You need to think about something that's going to be original, something fresh, something that crackles with energy. Editors are a bit like air traffic controllers, and we get submissions, we get approaches every day, all the time. So you have to Samara was alluding to this, you've got to present yourself in such a way that you are going to stand out. So I'll jump back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, but with fiction, it's sort of what I like to call high concept. So I've had the good fortune of working with a number of authors, including S.E. Adugin. So if you said to somebody, you know, S.E. wrote this book called Half-Blood Blues, and did you know that there were black Germans during the Third Reich? You will turn some heads if you say that. That's what I mean, is something original, something fresh that describes what your creative enterprise is going to be about. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of books that come out. So before you even present, make sure of your ground. Make sure that you really have researched your nonfiction idea. And when you are ready with that, and you really feel that you're going to bring something different to the equation, I'll give you an example. So on my reading list at the moment is a book that came from Oxford University Press by an academic called Colin Jones, which is called The Fall of Robespierre, 24 Hours in Revolutionary Paris. So this is looking at the fall of a tyrant at a granular level, hour by hour. That's something different. You know, there are many, many books about the French Revolution, but there is something that just might turn a head, something fresh, something different. Nobody's really done that before. Do you get my drift here? And when you have come up with that idea, as Samara said, you need to have an elevator pitch. You need to be able to talk about your book in one sentence. Why this is because of the series of hurdles that a book faces. Your job, of course, is as the creator to write this book. Then, when you're ready to present it, if you're going to an agent, you have to persuade an agent to represent you. Then the agent has to persuade an editor to take the book on. The editor then has to persuade the sales and marketing people that we should all take this book on and get behind it. The sales and marketing people, in turn, then have to turn around and get Indigo on board with the book. And then you've got to sell the book. And selling books is a whole mystery. And if we knew exactly how to sell books, we would be fabulously wealthy in this business. But as I think my colleague in the audience, Doug Gibson, once said, and it's true, 3 out of 4 books in this country lose money. We have a particular challenge. Please, hook me away from here if I'm going on too long. But we might as well say this now. We live in this wonderful country. There is no polity like it on the face of the earth. What we do here, what we value here, this work in progress that is Canada. But we have challenges here, tremendous challenges. And the main one is language, because we speak English. Our American cousins speak English, and we have to compete with them, therefore. And they have economies of scale, and they can price their books at a lower price point and all of that. We also have geography. This is a huge country, so distribution is an issue. Then we, with great respect to the citizenry, this is a very young country. So the sophistication, like France or England or many European countries, just simply isn't there. It's pretty thin ground. So we do have a dedicated readership. You can look it up on StatsCan. The readers in this country are in depth and devoted, and we sell lots of books here. But they also buy a lot of foreign books as opposed to Canadian authored books. So we're working within this context. It is said that you should be able to sail on international waters. Why shouldn't you? So you should think about English language, and that's where an agent becomes important. An agent is really your business manager. You can be your confidant. It's a whole lecture in itself, the rise of the agent and the role of the agent in the 21st century. But going back to your presentation, there's a lot to talk about, and my colleagues, I'm sure, will pick up on points. is that all-important proposal, which we both said needs to have that vision statement, and we're talking about nonfiction, and then I would say a page or two or whatever it takes to describe the work, the approach you're going to take, and then a provisional table of contents with a sentence or two describing each chapter. It doesn't have to be carved in stone, but it gives the editor a sense of the arc of the narrative that you're going to be engaged in and writing. You need to talk about yourself. Now, these days, perhaps not, my colleagues can speak to this, but certainly with the house that I work at, social media is huge. Profile, social media, how many hits does this person get? That plays into the publishing decision these days, big time. And there's a paradox inherent in that, because writers are introverted more. They're creative people. They look inward. They write books in small rooms, and they don't engage much except at the end of the day. And then they have to go out and flog a book. So suddenly you've got to become, an actor. You've got to become a performer. You've got to become a sales manager. So this all is in the mix. This is part of a much longer discussion. With fiction, I would just say, don't submit your fiction until you are absolutely sure you have nailed it. And that means having a working group, not your friends, but a working group, because your friends are not going to tell you bad stuff. If it's not working, you need a workshop or a group of people who will tell you, because when that fiction comes in, the editor can basically tell on the first page if it's worth anything. In fact, there are arguments that you can tell the entire book is coded in the first sentence of a book. Gordon Lish, who edited famously Raymond Carver, worked at Knopf, New York for many years, and he would say, yes, send me your book. And if we like the first sentence, we'll read the second sentence. And then we'll read the third sentence. So I cannot emphasize enough that when you submit fiction, it has got to say, read me. It has got to grab you by the lapels and make you want to read it. I'll give you a specific example and then I'll hand it over. I got a submission, there'll be no names mentioned, but I got a submission on Wednesday night. And I had a personal day the next day. Silly me, I looked at it. I couldn't put it down. This is a memoir of a daughter trying to find out about her mother, who was a Russian combat soldier, captured by the Germans, went through the camp system, Auschwitz, she wasn't Jewish, and somehow or other survived, only to be hunted down by the KGB at the end of the war. Who knew? But Stalin and his henchmen were looking for Russians everywhere. So I'm just saying that turned my head. I couldn't put it down. It was this unbelievable, crackling memoir. That is what we're looking for. That is what we're looking for. You don't want to end up selling 300 copies of your book. So a lot of thought needs to go in. I'll end there. A lot of thought needs to go into preparing the ground before you show. Okay? So there's a lot more to be said, but I think I should leave it there.
So next I'll invite Jen to come up and
I'm an elder millennial, so I'm bringing my phone for a clock. Okay. Wow, I would have worn my business lipstick if I knew. But, bear with, imagine it, it's red. So my name is Jen Nock. I'm an editor, a senior editor at ECW. And ECW, we're gonna be 50 in a couple years. So we're, like Nancy, we've been around a long time. We publish a wide range of books, so mystery, science fiction, literary fiction, poetry, sports books, a robust professional wrestling list, and memoir. Also, a fun fact that the editor who acquires the professional wrestling books also acquires the poetry list, so We all contain multitudes. Me, I do a lot of environment, health, some pop culture, a lot of books that we jokingly call do-gooder books. I'm interested in trying to use books to make the world a little bit better. And so on my day-to-day job, I am generally looking at proposals, doing what we call substantive editing, so that those first big edits, I could be doing some copy editing, I could even be dabbling in a little proofreading if a 250,000 word compelling book came my way, for example. And then I might want to proofread it. So I do all kinds of things. But I think, kind of gauging about where we've been, what I'll talk about is another part of my job, which is a very small part of my job, but I am the person behind our submissions account. So we don't have a portal, we have an email address. And on the other end is me, assisted by an auto-reply robot who passes for human, for which I'm grateful. And we get easily a couple thousand submissions a year. So quite a lot. We do, however, publish only about 60 books a year. And some of those come from authors that we've published before. Some of those are things we go out and we find an author and we ask them if they might write a book. So many of those do not even come from those unsolicited submissions. So just to give you a sense of really how many submissions there are, how many we go through, and it's tough out there. There's been some great tips already in how to negotiate this process, among them following instructions. That'll get you far. I love that. You can address a specific person if you're able to discover who that might be. That can be great. You don't have to. I urge you to avoid, for example, Dear Sirs, which in my case will get your email deleted. So, sorry. 2022. So things like that. I want you to keep in mind the frame of mind of a beleaguered submissions reader, such as myself, who has tasks that she is passionate about, that demand her creative energy, that are important and wonderful, and then you have a lot of submissions to look at. So I think that there's this idea that submissions editors we crank open the door in the morning and with a smile on our face and sit down and wonder what delights will be presented to us. When in fact, what I get is what you might get in any email box, a really wide range of things, some marvelous and some just totally bananas. And there's a wide middle ground there of stuff that is easier for me to digest, stuff that is offensive. Sometimes people are negging me somehow, being like, well, this has been rejected from other editors, but I assume you have taste. You're gonna trap me? Don't be a dick. I don't like you. That doesn't work. I'm sure none of you would do that. But just to say, I want you to get in the frame of mind I'm in. I'm trying to get in and I'm trying to get out. So please make my job easier in doing that. And one thing I do is I don't look at every submission we get. God have mercy. I funnel them off to my colleagues, so we all look at them. So what I'm looking for right away is, aside from a clear subject line, this is submission title, which is part of our instructions, if you read them, is I'm looking for a line at the beginning that says, this is the title of my book, this is the kind of book it is, poetry, nonfiction, science fiction, whatever it is, and this is how long it is. Those are three really great pieces of information for me. Most books, in terms of length, most novels are kind of between 60 and 100,000 words. That's pretty common. You can get a novella clocking in around 30. You can get something big and sweeping that pushes 100. And generally, we love books in that range. That's a very manageable length. So your book doesn't have to be. We do publish exceptions. The author of one such book is in this room. However, generally that's a pretty great range, and it's good for me to know. It also tells me that if you know what your market is like, If you're saying, and here is my 200,000 word opus on Taylor Swift, which actually that's a bad example because I'd be interested in that, but I'd be like, well, you don't really know how long a book on Taylor Swift should be. Or here's my 120,000 word poetry collection. Well, that's a lifetime. So that helps me funnel this off into other things. Okay, so we've survived the first line. You've achieved those 3 bullet points. The next section, which are some things that my colleagues have alluded to here, is I want a tight paragraph, one ideally, that tells you what your book is. When you think about any book on this shelf here, it has on its back a tight paragraph that tells you what the book is. So a lot of people get caught up in being like, I will tell you about every character in this book. I will outline the plot 1 sentence at a time. And it's really kind of sweet because obviously they're enthusiastic, but like there's no more boring way to outline a book than 1 sentence at a time. Like Die Hard, 1 sentence at a time would be very boring. So tight, it should be enticing. You do not have to tell me the whole thing. You just want to whet my appetite. You want me to get to opening that file that you've attached with your sample or your proposal. You want me to pay attention. And then usually I like another paragraph telling me about you, which is where you get to try out those wonderful things that you've done, like win prizes or publish here and there, or if you do happen to have a banging social media presence, that's a great place for it. Or other ways that you profile. If you're an in-demand speaker and you do a lot of speaking, for example, that can be great. If you own your own business and the book is in line with your business and you see yourself using your book in the business, also good for me to know. What we're looking for is not necessarily that you're the most famous person on TikTok. That'd be great, though. What we're looking for is that you have ways to be in touch with your audience, that you know who they are and they know who you are, so that there's a meaningful connection there and there's a better chance at your book being the one out of the many thousands that they decide to spend their hard-earned money on. If you can do 3 paragraphs, you are going to come out ahead of so many other people. Then it becomes opening that sample and, as Patrick said, 1 good sentence and then another. I will tell you how often I give up in reading these samples, usually within a page. Think about articles that you might be reading on the internet. How soon do you give up if you're not interested? Pretty fast. You find yourself turning to skimming, and then you realize you'd just rather do anything else. So, same thing here. Even though this is my job, yes, and so I'll try a bit harder than you might with whatever link somebody shared. Ultimately, I know that convincing people is a matter of hooking them so quickly. We have to get that reader who picks up the book in a store, reads 1 page, and then thinks, yeah, maybe I'll take that home. Or reads the little Amazon sample. And that's enough to convince them. So for me, that often is something like a voice that shines through automatically, that even if you're writing a novel that isn't something that feels unique, if it feels like a voice that is fresh and true and that I haven't read before, that isn't imitating someone else, that's enough to keep me reading. I've published some novels that are stories that are, I don't want to say nothing special because they're great books, but there's nothing shocking about the plot. What matters is the writing. And so you can really communicate a lot in those pages. I'm cognizant I'm nearing the end of my time. Other quick submission tips, let's see. No nagging, no dear sirs. Oh, you're gonna do great. Also, if we met somewhere like here, it's a good idea to mention that, to say hi. Meet a lot of people, but always if I know someone has been part of an esteemed program like this and we've had a chance to interact, it's a great idea to remind me of that, even if it's 3 years from now. And that's true, I think, of most editors, that if you had the chance to have that real life encounter, use it. And help us jog our memories because, as you can tell, we're reading many things that come through. Okay.
Last but not least, Richard.
this. Thanks. Hi, I'm the University Press editor here. I've been in the business, I'm fairly new. I've been in it about 20 years, which is probably less than any of my colleagues here. I had a lot of other things I did before that, before I finally settled down. It took me a while. I'm also here because my colleague, Emily Andrew, wasn't able to make it. She's our political science and public affairs editor. My areas of acquisition are primarily Central and Eastern European studies, primarily history, but also Latin American studies, also primarily history, anthropology, indigenous studies. So if you look on our website and look at the books on Ukraine, I'm probably responsible for all of them. So I'm distracted, shall we say. I recognize that there are some people here who are junior fellows, and so you're working towards your PhD, and you hope to get a book published and launch a career in academia. And there are also senior fellows who are here not because they want a scholarly career, but they want to write a book that makes a difference. And we do publish in both areas. McGill Queen's publishes about 150 books a year. I've been at McGill Queen's for just 4.5 years. Before that, I was at University of Toronto Press, and they publish about 200 books a year. There's also UBC Press with about 50 books a year, Manitoba, and then Wilfrid Laurier, and then a number of French language publishers, and those are probably the most of them. So we do publish, let's say broadly, public interest books, as well as your classic scholarly monographs, which these days sell, let's say, 300 copies and lose money every single one of them. But our mandate is to contribute to scholarship and not to make money, and so we do that very well. As an acquisitions editor, the stress is on acquisitions more than editing, so an acquisitions editor at any university press will give you relatively little help writing your book. You're expected to do that on your own. My primary job is really a gatekeeper. I'm the first one to say no. I don't get to say yes. I get to say no or maybe. We have an academic board that makes the final decision. So my job is to help you get to that academic board and make sure that they say yes. And part of that means helping you write a good proposal and helping you write your manuscript in a way that will persuade people that it's worth publishing. Then finding appropriate peer readers. All of our books are read anonymously by at least 2 readers and have to be recommended for publication. And then helping you write your response to those 2 readers in a way that persuades the academic board that you're a good member of the community and know how to take criticism, even when it's dumb, and can respond appropriately. So I generally read maybe carefully, I always read the introduction carefully and one chapter, and then I give you some hints and tell you, okay, now go and do likewise, right? If you can't do the rest, then I don't have time. And most of you, if you will have written a dissertation already, and revising your dissertation will be your first book. The scholarly book is still a fairly stable genre, so if you can manage to get through a dissertation, you can probably figure out how to turn it into a book, if it's worth turning into a book, and you'll be able to make that assessment with the help of an editor. So that's my day job, spending most of my time actually looking for readers, assessing proposals. Some of them come in unsolicited. We solicit. I find scholars that I want to publish who are, looking up at their websites. We go to conferences and meet people, look at what they're working on, try to find people who are, even in history, working on subjects that are of interest in the community today. So we work very little with agents, and actually prefer not to if we can. So you don't have to have an agent. So how to land a book deal? First, write a good proposal. And Samira mentioned the BCP, or ACP, Association of Canadian Publishers. They have a very good website. Look at it. That should be your next step. Look at it. There's a good list of all publishers in Canada. You can search it by area of publications. You can very quickly find all of the publishers in Canada that will publish in areas that you might be interested in, and then with links to their sites. So that that should be your first step. So, and then of course approach the right publishers, and that's true in university press publishing too. We all specialize in different areas or have different lists. You shouldn't, if you're an academic, you shouldn't restrict yourself to Canada. If your interest is in books in the Canadian public interest, then you should look at the presses represented here and more, all of us. And Patrick might know more about this in the nonfiction, but increasingly university presses are picking up what we call the mid-range trade list, that big trade publishers used to publish lots more quirky books, but now they all want those big winners because they have to pay the bills or pay the shareholders. Right, the details on our website, of course, look at those. If you're an academic, there's a very good recent book, Laura Portwood-Stacer, called The Book Proposal Book. It's published by Princeton University Press 2021 last year, just about 6 months ago. It's excellent. Look at that. And I'll stress too, focus on your, even if you're an academic, and whether you're an academic or whether you're writing in the public interest, really stress your core contribution. You need to decide what you are adding to the conversation, whether it's your academic colleagues or the broader public interest, and tell me why that's important. It has to be important in scholarship as well as in the public interest. So focus relentlessly on your core contribution and the one thing that you want readers to get when they have finished reading your book, and why they should bother to read your book. That's critical to everybody you approach. And be clear about your audience. That's been mentioned before. It can be academic, professional, policy, general, high, medium, low range in there. There's obviously going to be a mix of those. In terms of writing, one thing just in terms of writing, in academic and maybe also in trade nonfiction, I always tell people, write your proposal before you write your book. You don't want to spend years writing a book and then have nobody interested in publishing it. So don't write a manuscript in nonfiction and then look for a publisher. Look for a publisher first if you think you have a good idea, because if you can't find a publisher, you don't, unless you are independently wealthy and have a trust fund somewhere, you don't want to do that. Right. Write in your own voice. Use quotation sparingly. Like, do not use a secondary source to support any major claim. That you can use it to say that you learned it from something, but make your own claims in your own voice. And that's certainly important in scholarship. It's very important in a public interest book. Say, I am taking responsibility for these ideas, for these arguments, even if you learned them from somebody else. But take responsibility for them. I can't tell you how often I see, just speaking of things that irritate us, people, their whole proposal is a string of quotations from, secondary sources, and they're all important claims, and I'm going to argue all of these. Well, somebody else has already made them. I mean, why are you making them again? Why are you just, lining them up for me? One more minute. Top myths I'd like to debunk about producing book. I don't know what, I guess I don't know much about what myths there are, so I thought of one, that the myth that the book industry is in crisis. I think it's been in crisis for 500 years, and if you have a story, it's worth telling, and you will find a publisher, and I just tell that to myself every night before I go to bed so I can sleep. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Well, we can open the floor up to questions, and Florence.
Hi, I have many questions.
Wait. Sorry. Oh, okay. So, one thing, because we are recording for the people who cannot be here today, we're kind of having to play a little bit of, a bit of whack-a-mole or musical chairs or whatever you did. But I would ask that if you could go up to the podium to speak into the mic so that we can get it recorded. That would be great.
Do I go first?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is does that work? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. This is like a two-part question because I'm annoying. So the first one is, so there was some talk of saying what you've written before and things like that. How do I navigate the kind of the fact that, I wrote something more literary, but all my background is academic, so all of my publications are academic, and things like that, like saying, oh well, I already wrote a book, but it's not literary, so I don't have that experience. So the first one is, how do I navigate that? And then the second is, how do you pitch and kind of interest someone who's like not in your primary audience? Because my primary audience is like kind of like queer, like sort of like marginalized groups, and there are extremely few like acquisitions editors who kind of share that experience and will like relate to it in the same way that like most of my readership would. How do I get people interested at that level?
Jen, do you want to take a crack at answering? If you wouldn't mind going up to the podium.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
Part 1, your academic experience, just mention it. All of my writing thus far has been in the academic field. This is the name of the book I published, or whatever. You don't have to get as granular then, because if it's not relevant to your subject matter, we don't care all that much, to be frank. However, it does show that you've been through a book writing process before. It shows that you've had experience thinking through ideas, articulating those ideas, even if you're doing it for a different audience. So it's not nothing, but you don't need to go into as much detail as if you're pitching a literary book and you had a ton of literary titles. Okay, part 2. So I think you don't want to underestimate the curiosity and the interests of the editors that are there. I am a straight lady. I just signed up a book on safe sex that is inspired by the queer community, the non-monogamous community, sex workers, etc. So that's not part of my personal experience. However, it was a great proposal. I thought it was a relevant topic, and I'm super excited to work on it. So there's that. Also, I would say that acquiring editors, we have a lot more diversification of acquiring editors than there used to be. Namely, like in the last 5 years, a lot of houses are making a concerted effort to do that, including us. And so even if it was something that perhaps did not appeal to me personally, if you were pitching me, I could forward it on to one of my colleagues for whom it might be a better fit. So it doesn't mean like, oh, the straight white lady's reading my book, she'll think it sucks. Not necessarily. And in fact, like, we are making a concerted effort, I think, as an industry to serve underserved communities more. Those are very strong book buying audiences, and who have been historically underserved. So why wouldn't we want to now? That's misguided in so many ways. So.
Next question.
Thank you guys very much for coming here and spending time and sharing your knowledge. I just have 2 questions. One is, what if the background that I had was in publishing, self-publishing, but through a university program, so I didn't know how to market or anything like that. It was just writing the book, and they send it to all the hospitals because it was a more medical book. So then would you recommend going the self-publishing route or go through publishing route? If it's a book that is a medical topic, but can help a lot of people in concussions, also therapists. And the second question is, I don't know what the normal offer is for a book contract, and so I was wondering what would that normally look like if I were to go to a publisher, so I know I'm not being undermined or over excited for.
Who would like to take that question? I can Sarah to start, right?
In terms of your first question, if a book has been self-published, it doesn't make it necessarily the case that it still isn't a good candidate for consideration by a publishing house. The things in my former company, we published some books that were self-published and were quite successful, but we felt there was more market to tap. So that's really the thing that is going to be the question that anyone's examining. Sending it in, you can still submit it like an unsolicited. We would just look to see, have you already reached all the readers you could reach with your self-published version in terms of how many copies are out in market, or is there untapped potential still, in which case if you still own all the rights, then that's a possibility. There are medical publishers in Canada, and not only the bigger ones. I know, not to tell you where to go, but I know like Brush Education in Alberta has some really unique books, and there are other sort of trade slash, medical educational publishers so you sound like your project fits some sort of hybrid models, so I would encourage you. And then regarding numbers, it is, and I'm not trying to be cagey when I say this, it is a little bit hard to sort of like give a quick list of all of the advances, because they really vary by company, and they vary by genre, and they do vary by also sort of market potential. So when I was making that comment earlier, what I mean to say is, and I guess I can't really speak for all the publishers, but I've worked at a few, and I know a lot of people who work at different companies, and it might be understandable to think that you or one might be, receiving a lowball offer. I would encourage you to think that's not the case. One of the really top of mind things for years, but I would say especially, as Jen was mentioning in another area in the last few years, is I'm always thinking about equity and surfacing underrepresented voices, marginalized voices, and that goes down to the money as well. So we are really thoughtful about all of that in our company, and I hope that helps address the question.
Can I just add something to that, to what someone said, that just to say this, it's really, really important to remember that book publishing is a business. It is a business. It's not a philanthropic kind of enterprise. So one of the things you can do is go work it backwards and look at a book for $30. So you're going to get, let's say, 10%. So you're going to get $3 a book. How many books are you going to have to sell in order to earn out your advance? So you can sort of figure it out that way.
Next question?
Hey, Patrick, this may be a question for you, but if anyone, feel free to jump in. So the slush pile is something that every aspiring author has heard about and fears. Are you more likely to read something or publish something from a slush pile, or something that an agent has handed to you?
Well, you raise a very important thing. I have probably the all-time slush pile story in publishing. My first job was at McClelland and Stewart in 1971, and I lasted in that job for 9 months because of shell shock. We got 5,000 manuscripts in 9 months. 5,000. They came in shopping bags. They came in brown paper wrapping tied up with string. I had a poet once call me and said, could he recite his poems on the phone to me because he didn't have enough money to send the poems in. So the slush pile is a very, very tricky thing. One of the reasons, by the way, that was happening at McClelland Stewart in those days is that Jack McClelland had gone to the Ontario government to get a loan, and one of the, I think you can attest to this, Doug, that one of the conditions was that he open up the gates and anybody could send their manuscript in. So yes, if you have somebody to recommend you, that will go probably further than even an agent. If you had Margaret Atwood say, this is a very terrific book, you must look at it, or somebody who is known that the editor would recognize, that is going to help enormously. One is a little bit leery of creative writing teachers, who often are writers, praising their students, because at a creative writing school, of course, they want the creative writing students to succeed. And so their praise, may be a little bit, wonderful, but not as accurate as it ought to be. So just sending a manuscript in, perhaps some of my colleagues have talked about, yes, there are rules about that. HarperCollins does not accept unsolicited manuscripts at all, so you have to come via an agent, or another writer recommends you, or somebody in the community who's a known person to do that. Going back to your question in the front row, that you were talking about genre and so on, and categories. All that matters is it's really good. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if it's this category or that category or about this or about that. It just simply has to be outstanding, And as Richard said at the end of his remarks, why would you want to read this book? Often editors are going, why am I reading this? And you don't want an editor to have that reaction. Or who is going to read it? And you really, really need to think about your readers. Like, who is going to read your book? Who do you think will read your book? And will it matter? And are you doing something? Are you writing a necessary book? Is it necessary to write this book, to put it out there, and what are you going to do? What effect is this book going to have? It'll please your mom and your aunts and all of that, but is it going to make a difference? I think that's so important to remember.
Hi. Thank you guys all, especially for your very practical tips about following instructions and very basic stuff I think that we often don't think about. And on that note, I had a question. Do you feel, obviously as a journalist, I've been a freelancer for a long time, and there's kind of unspoken rules about how you pitch. So you don't pitch, I shouldn't offer it to one publication and offer it to another publication. And I'm wondering in the book publishing world, if you have that same idea, I shouldn't submit it to 2 different publishing houses, or it doesn't.
As long as you tell the publisher you're doing that.
Write my submission, by the way, I also submitted it to this person.
Select a small multiple submission. That's absolutely fair.
So state it. You think we should state it?
You should say that at the end of the letter. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You don't have to be specific though,
No.
and also I think most of us assume you are. Very few of us expect to be pitched one at a time.
Yeah.
So it's like a pretty safe assumption that it's out in the world of email at least,
Could some of you say a few words about pricing? I had a very unusual experience myself about 5 years ago, having written a book about 100,000 words, reasonable length, that didn't entail any unusual publication charges. There was no heavy editing, not expensive illustrations, no permissions. And my co-author and I were never consulted about the price. And then we discovered that it was priced at a level that not even libraries would buy it. And the result of that was that it sank like a stone. What goes into the pricing of a book? And do you collectively give the author any part in that conversation? I should say, by the way, that the publisher was an otherwise prestigious offshore publisher. It was not a Canadian press at all that gave me this misfortune.
Yeah, please.
Usually we price books based on what the market can bear, and every publishing house has an idea of where they want to be competitively. So for instance, our picture books are not priced as high as some of the multinationals in Canada. That's intentional, even though I think we sometimes need to edge them up, to be honest. But so we are thinking about what will people pay for this, both individuals in the trade buying the book, like any of us as individuals, as well as libraries, as well as schools. And that applies to not just kids' books, but lots of others as well. We don't consult our authors on the price because across our company, we have that understanding, that expertise. You would see the price as one of our authors when we send you the cover that has the price on it. So you certainly should know all of those things before your book arrives in your hands. But it isn't generally something that is a discussion with the author for those reasons. Also going into the price is the unit cost of what it takes to print the book, although we are in a fairly extraordinary time right now because those numbers are going astronomically up. And honestly, I think many of us are thinking, I'm not sure we can continue to bear this without raising prices, just like so many other things are raising. We haven't yet with books, and I think we're going to need to. And not to get into a whole other sort of cultural discussion, but some of my colleagues discussed it here. As an individual here in Canada, I was not born here. I moved here as a youngster. And, you know, we have to, or not, prize reading and literature and scholarship and research and journalism as a culture, and we have to be willing to support it with our dollars, as well as, like, we have to pay the writers. You know, it's not supposed to be free. I often think if we had like a pithy PR something, and I am not the person to create this, but you know, that Kleenex box in a classroom, someone paid for that and thinks it has value. Well, the work is also, anyway, all of that goes into the pricing discussions as well, is just sort of what we can bear. So little tangent there, but I hope that answered your question.
Let's take one last question and then we can jump in.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for all the information today. Let's say you are a helpless literature lover and you don't really care about like what kind of readers will read your book or your text, and what matters to you is just like writing something that you think is important. You don't want to think about the transaction behind, you don't want to think about the economy behind, and maybe eventually it's even worse than that, it's poetry. What would you do? You know, how do we do, like, what would be your advice there?
I'm actually very glad you said that, because often I forgot to do it this time. I always say in these kinds of discussions, no matter what I say or my colleagues say, all that matters is what is in front of you. That's all that matters, really. And that is where the act of creation and the originality and the excitement and the importance and import of what you're doing occurs. All this other stuff is there, but it should not impinge on the creation of your work. So if you're sitting there thinking, you know, well, who's going to read my poetry in Calgary, and maybe there are going to be some people in Belleville who will read it, that's not the thing. So yes, I mean, I don't think Mordecai Richler thought about, you know, his publishers that much as he's writing Duddy Kravitz or whatever he was writing. No, if you're a genre writer, yes. If you're a crime mystery writer, I mean, I had my best friend's wife, actually I might as well say it, my best friend John Massey, who's attached to this college, his late wife, set out to write a domestic crime thriller. She'd never done it before. But she did the research and the work and the rewriting, and she ended up with a book called The Silent Wife, which was a New York Times bestseller. I mean, I use that in lectures and in book publishing. It was a small M miracle. I mean, it rarely happens, but it can happen. So just to give you the idea. So that person was thinking about the audience, was thinking about the genre, and it was very specific. But if you are a literary writer, a poet, and you're just, it's an act of pure creation, you're writing short fiction, then those considerations are not as important until you get to the point where I've done this and it's absolutely extraordinary. Then you begin to think about the things that we're talking about.
Cool. Okay, so we'll, I think this concludes the sort of formal portion of the event, and we'll get to the coffee and tea and goodies. Thank you so much to all of our special guests. Really great advice. And thanks to our tech team and the catering team, and to Emily Mockler, who's helped put this together, and the other journalism fellows. So yeah, please, everybody, let's talk about your book ideas.